Hey everyone, welcome back. Whether you're a practicing chartered accountant, a tax pro, a CA student, or a business owner managing complex tax portfolios, we're absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, we're diving straight into a brand new explainer on the Income Tax Act 2025. Specifically, we're zeroing in on Chapter Xviii. We're going to unpack the special provisions designed to help you avoid repetitive appeals. That's Sections 375 and 376.
Now let me ask you a question that I'm sure hits close to home. Are you just completely tired of litigating the exact same tax issue year after year? I mean, it's a massive pain point for us, right? You're wasting precious time, draining client resources, and burning administrative energy on identical disputes for different years, all because a precedent hasn't been finalized by the higher courts yet. Well, the 2025 Act tackles this head-on, and as you'll see, we're going to break down exactly how it works.
All right, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the problem of repetitive appeals, then explain Sections 375 and 376. After that, we'll walk through a practical tax example, cover the compliance forms and requirements, highlight some common practical issues, and finally, wrap up with a summary and key takeaways. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the problem of repetitive appeals.
So, looking at the old framework, avoiding repetitive litigation was governed by Sections 158A and 158AB of the 1961 Act. Now, over the decades, these sections got kind of fragmented. The intent was always good, pause the litigation when the identical question of law is already pending before the High Court or Supreme Court, but in practice, the application felt really disjointed. Fast forward to the Income Tax Act 2025, and these mechanisms have been beautifully reorganized into Sections 375 and 376. The core policy is totally intact, but it's not presented in a logical, much more reader-friendly format.
Moving on to Section 2, Sections 375 and 376 explained.
Okay, the departmental FAQs actually clearly delineate two separate pathways here. First, Section 375 is what we call assessee-driven. This means you, the taxpayer, proactively make a declaration during the assessment or appellate stage, agreeing to just apply whatever the final outcome of the higher court is. Simple enough, right? On the flip side, Section 376 is collegium-driven. This kicks in when a departmental collegium decides to defer filing a further appeal, let's say to the ITAT or the High Court, because they recognize that the exact same issue is already awaiting a higher court ruling.
But here's the absolutely crucial part. You gotta understand the prerequisites to trigger either of these sections. First, an identical question of law must arise in your current case. Second, that exact same question has to already be pending before a jurisdictional high court or the Supreme Court. And third, and honestly this is a fantastic transitional safeguard, the pending matter can actually relate to proceedings under either the old 1961 Act or the new 2025 Act. This ensures a completely smooth continuity across the statutory transition.
Let's make this concrete. Section 3, a practical tax example. All right, imagine your client is facing scrutiny over a specific deduction for the new tax year 2026-27. Now, you know this exact same deduction was disallowed back in tax year 2024-25, but that older case is currently sitting pending before the High Court. So for Step 2, the assessee files the prescribed statutory form, Form 117. In Step 3, the assessing officer examines it and says, yep, the question of law is identical. Finally, in Step 4, instead of going through the whole grueling litigation process again, the AO just defers the decision. They literally just hit pause and wait to apply whatever the High Court eventually decides. It is a massive time and cost saver.
All right, Section 4, Compliance Forms and Requirements.
So for the SSE, your magic key here is Form 1117, which maps to Rule 194 of the Income Tax Rules 2026. This is your official statutory declaration. By filing Form 1117, you're formally telling the assessing officer or the appellate authority, hey, this legal question is identical to a pending High Court or Supreme Court matter. And that can be in your own case for a different year or even another SSC's case. You are basically committing that you'll conform to the final decision of that higher judicial body, whatever it may be.
Now conversely, when the revenue invokes their collegium-driven mechanism under Section 376, the assessing officer is going to use Form 118, which falls under Rule 195. The AO files this one before the appellate tribunal or the High Court to formally request the deferral of their own appeal. Basically, it's the revenue's procedural tool to maintain consistency and cut down on their own repetitive litigation load.
Next up, Section 5, Common Practical Issues.
Let's talk about some watch-outs so you don't trip up on procedural errors. First up, a really common misconception. You absolutely cannot invoke Sections 375 or 376 if the issue is only pending before the Joint Commissioner of Appeals, the CIT Appeals, or the ITAT. The statute is super strict here. It requires pendency at the High Court or Supreme Court level. No exceptions. Second, remember this isn't a unilateral right. The assessing officer or appellate authority has to actually agree that the legal question is identical. If they dispute the facts, the deferrals just won't apply. And finally, when you're e-filing Form 117, please pay close attention to terminology. The new act uses the term tax year instead of assessment year or previous year. You've got to cross-reference those tax years perfectly between the old 1961 Act and the new 2025 Act procedures.
Wrapping things up with Section 6, Summary and Key Takeaways.
To quickly summarize, Chapter 18b is pretty much your best friend when it comes to fighting redundant tax disputes. Just keep in mind that Sections 375 and 376 of the 2025 Act are the streamlined successors to the old Sections 158A and 158AB. If you're representing an assessee, you're going to drive the process using Form 117 under Section 375. If the revenue is the one deferring, they'll use Form 18 under Section 376. But the golden rule for both, an identical legal question must already be pending before a high court or the Supreme Court. If you can master these forms and get your factual mapping right, you are going to save your clients a literal ton of time and money.
So what strategies are you going to implement to identify repetitive litigation early in your practice? Definitely something to think about as you review your open cases this week. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. This explainer is for educational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. Tax laws are subject to amendments. Please consult your professional advisor before taking any action. This is an AI-generated educational explainer.